So I didn't know I was going to make this video today, but the Valorant has just announced the VCT Lock-In Brazil format and how it's going to work. And there are some real surprises in there. And so this is the big tournament with all of the partnered teams that are going to take place. So all 30 partner teams, and they're explaining the format. And so let's see what is going to happen in February.
Hello, I'm Tichinha, shoutcaster in VCT Brazil, and welcome to Lock-In, the first global event of the new Valorant Champions Tour. Over the next 3 weeks, 32 teams will battle.
Okay, let's stop there. Let's stop there straight away. Because you might know, if you've been following Valorant at all, that there's only 30 partnered teams in Valorant. So why did he say 32 teams? Well, he said 32 teams because tagged on at the end here are the 2 Chinese teams. Now, we did not know this, but these are the best 2 Chinese teams, Edward Gaming and FPX. Now, this isn't the old FPX, who are now mostly Na'Vi. This is Chinese FPX. FPX basically had 2 teams running the whole time. They had an EMEA team and they had a Chinese team. And so now that, the EMEA FPX doesn't exist, the Chinese team now is just FPX. And so don't get confused. But yes, the 2 Chinese teams are getting invited to this tournament as well. This makes sense to me because I think that these teams are like, a decent enough level to compete. We saw that with EDG at the, last Champions tournament. So I have no problem with it whatsoever. But what I think is interesting is, would this have happened had the game not released in China officially? Or, being released officially in China this year, whatever? I don't know. And so this might have been a last minute thing. I don't know how long this has been in the works, but of course it makes a lot more sense to have a tournament with 32 teams, a really nice tournament number, rather than 30 teams, a really shaky tournament number where it's kind of difficult to see how you're going to do it. And so this makes a lot of sense. And so hype for China. We get to see the 2 Chinese teams in the tournament as well. And let's carry on.
Through the biggest tournament in Valorant esports history.
Ele quer demais e tá lá!
Every team from the Americas, Pacific, and EMEA leagues will be in attendance, as well as 2 representatives from China.
Meu Deus, o perigo!
To secure victory, teams will have to battle through a gauntlet of matches where there will be no room for error. The concept is brutally simple, a single elimination bracket all the way to the top. Teams.
Okay. And there is the big thing as well. There is the massive, massive thing. You heard him say it right there. He's about to say something that might confuse some people, but don't get this wrong whatsoever. This is how it is going to work. It is just a straight up single elimination bracket. Each team gets paired with, other teams and in groups and stuff like that. Like, they get paired, they get drawn out, whatever. And then it's just single elim. 32 teams. So half of the teams, 16 teams, are going to play one game and go home. Right? They're going to play one best of 3 and get going, right? You're gone. Get out. We don't want you here anymore, right? Pretty brutal. And we'll get into kind of, all of that and whatnot as well, but let's just carry on.
Teams will be drawn and placed into 2 groups that will build each side of the 32-team bracket.
Meu Deus!
It's best of 3 up into the final 4 and best of 5s to close out the tournament. That's it. You're not gonna want to miss a match.
Okay, so now let's go into the kind of graphics and stuff and see where the teams are and who they will be playing against in their first games. So now let's take a look at the actual games themselves and what is going to be going on, okay? Now, I'm not going to go predicting and telling you which teams I think, will definitely win and definitely lose and all of that. I will tell you who I think got a pretty rough draw and a pretty good draw. So let's go on through these games pretty quickly. We've got Made in Brazil versus Talon. To start off, we got Heretics versus EG. We have Paper Rex versus Cloud9. That is going to be a banger first game. And remember, one of those teams, Paper Rex or Cloud9, is playing one game and then they're going home. Then you've got DRX versus BBL. You've got Carmine versus FPX. This is a China FPX, don't forget. You've got Loud versus Gen G. Giants versus Detonation, and Koi versus NRG. So when I'm looking at this side of the bracket, right, so this is all one side of the bracket. The way that you read this is the winner of this game here will come to play the winner of these, then the winner of this game will come to play down here, and then the winner of that gets into the semi-final, and then, you know, we pause and we wait and we play the semi-final later on. In terms of teams that got a good draw here, I'm looking at this top 4 teams here. There isn't really any like true big favorite, big name team in there. So one of these 4 teams in this top left here is getting to the quarterfinal, right? So, you know, they're going pretty far into this tournament. NRG perhaps didn't get the roughest draw ever, but I do think that Koi could put up a fight. And Loud, I think, got a pretty favorable draw as well. I think out of these 4 teams, you know, they'll definitely be favored to get to that quarterfinals, and then maybe even, you know, reestablish their rivalry with some of the old Optic players, with Chet and FNS and all of that. That would be fun to see if that does come to pass. But they really got a rough draw here is PaperX, Cloud9, and DRX, right? Particularly PaperX and Cloud9, because one of those 2 teams is going straight home, and then probably, you know, the winner of that has to then play DRX. You could also say that BBL got a really rough draw as well, because they have to play DRX, and then if they win, they have to play the winner of PaperX versus Cloud9. So definitely not an easy draw for them either. Coming on to the other side of the bracket, we've got Furia versus T1. Fnatic versus Sentinels. Again, one of those 2 teams is playing 1 game and going home. EDG versus 100 Thieves, Rex Regan versus Foot, Global versus Vitality, Leviathan versus Zeta Division, Crew versus Na'Vi, and Team Secret versus Team Liquid. Now, obviously, Fnatic and Sentinels is like the big draw game there. Obviously, 2 of the most popular teams in Valorant are going to go head to head, and yeah, one of them's going home straight away. But whoever wins that game, you know, will probably feel confident in being able to beat T1 or Furia. But 100 Thieves, I think, have a pretty easy quadrant of teams here, right? They'll be favored against EDG, I think, most likely, and then be favored again against whoever wins out of Rex and Foot here. So they'll probably feel pretty confident about getting to the quarterfinals, who, you know, and then we'll see who they play. On the other side, you know, you've got some really good teams here like Na'Vi, you got Team Liquid. I think Leviathan are a team that can do a lot of damage. I think Vitality and Zeta as well are teams that could be pretty good also. So on this side of the bracket, I think it's going to be pretty hard. Your favorites would probably be Na'Vi, maybe Team Liquid, but I do think, you know, it won't be too easy for anyone on this kind of half of the bracket. And actually, they made some interesting decisions here as well with how it's going to be scheduled. So basically what's going to happen is all of the alpha matches, so all of the kind of one half of the bracket, that's all going to get played first, right? We're going to go through all of one side of the bracket, get it down to the semifinals, you know, first from February 13th to 19th, and then we're going to go to the other side as well. So we're going to see the side with like DRX and Cloud9 and PaperX. They're going to go off first and get to the semifinalists. And then we're going to go to the other side with Sentinels, Fnatic, Team Liquid, Na'Vi, all of those. Then, you know, they all play their games, and, you know, we just focus on that side of the bracket. So we'll already know 2 semi-finalists before we even get to half of the teams playing, which is an interesting way of doing it. Those teams that make it out of this first one will be waiting like a long time to play their semi-final, right? It won't be on, you know, they finish on February 19th, but they won't play until March, their semi-final, which is a bit odd, but that is the way that they have decided to do it. And I know, obviously, the main thing here is going to be it's only single elimination, right? And that is going to be a big thing for a lot of people that, you know, one of Fnatic or Sentinels, they're playing 1 game and going home. One of PaperX or Cloud9, they're playing 1 game and going home. We saw that the head of Riot Esports talked about this, about, you know, that they want big events to be single elim where possible because it raises the stakes, right? Every game has a lot of meaning now, right? There isn't any game where you're kind of like, well, you know, it's only groups and it's, you know, you have a second chance in groups anyway. So, you know, this first game, it's just a bit of a warm-up game. If you lose, you know, you can still make it through. There is none of that, right? You can't lose any game. And obviously some of the benefits of single elim, and I know a lot of people don't like single elim, but some of the benefits are that obviously, as I said, every game has a lot of stakes to it, right? There is no off games. There is no bad games. You have to be on top form straight away, right? And secondly, of course, it makes underdog stories, fairy tale runs, all of that more likely, right? You only have to win 1 best of 3 maybe, and you can get pretty far. As I said, for these teams in this like top left bracket here, you know, one of those teams is getting to the quarterfinals, and then they only have to win 1 best of 3 against whoever comes out of the other side, and they're in the semifinals, right? And no one would have expected Talon or Made in Brazil or Heretics or Evil Geniuses to get that far, right? But one of them could very easily get that far. They aren't that far away from it. So, you know, this is going to be an interesting tournament because of that. I do think there are some downsides. One notable one being that we don't know how good any of these teams are, really. And honestly, coming out of this tournament, we still won't know how good any of these teams are. because it's, you know, other than maybe the team that wins or teams that get very far, everyone else you can just say, well, we lost one best of 3, right? That doesn't tell you how good you actually are, right? One of Sentinels or Fnatic is going home after 1 game, but does that mean they're a bad team? No, of course not, right? So there is some limiting potential there because, you know, we basically aren't going to be able to figure out how good these teams are probably until we get, you know, towards actually Masters 2 in Tokyo, you know, halfway through the year pretty much. That's when we'll actually have a decent idea of how good are these teams. And so I'm sure you all will have your own thoughts on, you know, how this should work and whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. It's an interesting way of doing it. I'm glad that the 2 Chinese teams are there. I think that's a great addition, and I think that it just makes scheduling the tournament a lot easier. There are some other ways that they could have done this, right? Maybe a best of 1 groups into a best of 3 elimination stage, something like that. You know, maybe that could have worked and give us a better idea of how good these teams actually are. But you know, it's how they're going to go with it. And they clearly want single elim to be, you know, a big part of this tournament. And it's going to be interesting to see who wins. Teams are going to have to be on their game straight away. These teams are going to be putting in a lot of prep for what could be just 1 game. And in fact, half of them are only going to play 1 game.